So our goal for today is to give you all some knowledge on conflict styles, some tips on how to resolve conflicts, which we think will help you build just better relationships and a better reputation for yourself. So conflict resolution is the process of managing and resolving disagreements in a peaceful way. Believe it or not, conflict is actually very normal, even if it kind of makes us feel uncomfortable and it kind of feels like a burden. But it's normal because we're all diverse. We're not all just copy and paste people. So we all just have different wants, needs, and perspectives and values, and this is usually what makes us collide and have those conflicts. Uh, so conflict also is not always negative. It can help us learn and grow and realize things about ourselves that we didn't know, and vice versa. Like whomever you may have an issue with that you're trying to resolve, you'll get to learn about how they handle situations and how they approach things. So overall, it just gives you a glimpse into what you're like and what the other person is like. So the first thing that we need to do to tackle conflict resolution is understand the five different types of styles that there are. And we have competing, accommodating, avoiding, compromising, and collaborating. And if you're anything like me, you're probably looking at the screen like, I have no idea what any of these are, or I don't know which one I am, or if I use one style more than the other. So I felt the same way, and I figured that a nice thing that we could learn today would probably be what conflict style we use personally. So I went and found a really helpful self-assessment. It took me roughly like 6 to 7 minutes to complete. So I figured I'd give you guys that time here to complete the self-assessment to get to know yourselves. So that way, whenever you find yourself in another conflict in life, you can be like, that is what I use. Uh, so feel free to either scan that QR code or I am going to drop a link in the chat. And just if you have the time or if you want to, please go ahead and complete that self-assessment. It taught me about myself a little, so I hope I can teach you something about yourself. And I will go ahead and set the timer. I'll give you like 7 minutes and then we can come back. Okay, so that's our time. So if you're close to finishing, or if you did finish, you would probably see that at the end it gives you your score and it tells you the style and then what percentage. So you may be like, huh, it does give you a quick little summary, but I'm just going to go ahead and kind of summarize what each style means in a way that you can recognize it and some tips on how to either use it or if you want to use it someday, how to use it. So the folks who use competing style, they're widely known for their strong desire to win. So you'll notice that they're very assertive. They know exactly what they want. And this can often times come off a little aggressive. But this style is great when you need to stand up for things that truly matter to you, or when you're on crunch time and you need to get your point across. If you use this, or if you ever find yourself wanting to use this style, just make sure that you're being kind and mindful of others. Be willing to compromise because we're not always right. And then try to use those negotiation and persuasion skills that you may have. So when I took the self-assessment, accommodating was my highest percentage, and I could see why. I could definitely be like, okay, I could see that. Makes sense. Anyways, so people who use this are very passive. They're non-assertive, meaning that they're willing to give in. But this doesn't mean that you don't care or that you're weak. It just means that you're simply willing to put others first, if it means that there's going to be peace. A good time to use this style is if the conflict at hand doesn't really matter that much to you, or if you're open to meet halfway. A tip I'll share with you all is that at some point you gotta be ready to set boundaries. Like you'll give in a few times, but then you'll start to feel burnt out or you'll feel happy. And that's just your body's way of saying, hey, please stand up for us. Um, And if you feel like you can't do this alone, it's totally fine to ask for help. When it comes down to negotiating, to resolving the issue, make sure to prioritize yourself, even though it's really hard, I know. But you need to make sure that your needs and your wants are heard. We also have avoiding. So these are the people who simply avoid conflict at all cost, either by downplaying it or procrastinating. This style is highly recommended if you find yourself in a heated argument where you know confrontation is dangerous, like if someone might get physical or they could pull out a weapon. So you kind of avoiding is good for these situations. It's also good if you don't need to resolve the issue like right away. Like you have time to sit back and analyze the conflict thoroughly and then just, think about different approaches or what different solutions you could come up with. Tips for you, be truthful. I know sometimes we'll start making up excuse after excuse from hurting feelings or to resolve an issue. But it's best to address issues earlier than later. And if you feel like you can't do it alone, uh, get help. So then we also have compromising, and compromising is just how it sounds. These are the folks that are willing to meet halfway, even if it means you get something, but then I'll also get something in return. So this is great if you're arguing with someone and you're like, okay, they are actually making somewhat sense, and you know that if you guys keep arguing, there's just no way that either of you will walk away winning. So you have to come together to compromise. Some tips for you, if you use this style, is to clearly state what you need and then listen to what the other person is asking for. And try to be creative with the solution because it just doesn't have to be black or white. You could think outside of the box. and we have collaborating. And this is actually when there is a win-win solution. So you're both open to whatever the other person has to say, and you're willing to kind of collaborate and come up with each solution that works out for both of you. Uh, this style is used when there's a complex issue at hand, and you need a solution that you know will have a long-term impact. And you'll see this style being used like in businesses, or parents use this too. Remember that when you're using this style, try to listen, come in with a positive attitude, and even though it's very like you bring in your 2 cents and I'll bring in my 2 cents, you can also just put them all together and have a more 4 cents. I don't know. Um, so now that we've discussed the different styles that you may use, we also need to figure out the last puzzling piece of how do we resolve the conflict. And I know that resolving isn't always the easiest thing, and figuring out how to do it is also kind of a burden at times. Uh, but the journey that we need to go through to get to the resolution can all be accessed with these 4 points, and they're free. So, no need to go above and beyond. The answer is within us. So, we'll go through each of them. So first things first, you gotta be willing to listen, or you're not gonna get anywhere or resolve anything. So remember, listen to understand, not just to rebuttal or have your little clapback moment. Try having either a cup of coffee like they are, or just go in a setting where everyone, like, you aren't confrontational and you're willing to listen. Um, if you're having like face-to-face conversations, or if you're on FaceTime or like on some video chat, also use some like nonverbal cues where you're either nodding your head that you're paying attention, or you're making your hands visible somehow. People love it when you paraphrase because it shows that you're listening, and make sure to ask questions. That way, you kind of actually look like you care, which you should be caring to resolve the issue since you're trying to get involved and asking questions and understanding what the other person is trying to say. And then when you're speaking, make sure to clearly make your needs, wants, and perspective known. That way, the other person can't be like, well, you never said that. If you say it from the beginning, it'll save you a headache. Uh, when you're talking, make sure that your brain automatically doesn't start blaming or accusing the other person. Uh, Try to express yourself using like I statements, like I feel, I think, and so forth. Kind of steer clear and avoid saying you make me feel or you. And just watching your tone of voice can definitely have a say on how the other person will react to what you're saying. Um, Keep yourself cool, calm, and collected, and be open to whatever the other person has to say. I know sometimes we think we're right and the other person is wrong, but if we give them the time of day and we listen to what they have to say, we could come to realization of, hey, yeah, I could see where I did wrong, or I could see how their perspective differs from mine and why we're clashing. And then we have negotiating, and this may seem like a lot to digest, but negotiating, we need it to resolve problems, and it's a skill that's very essential, whether we have a problem at hand or just in life in general. So when we're negotiating, the first thing you got to do is get all your stuff together. And this means that you're figuring out what you want, what you're willing to give up, and what your best alternatives are if things don't go as planned. So you do this preemptively before you meet with the person. You could jot this down, or if you memorize everything, that's okay too. Just make sure to prepare. And then once you feel like you've prepared and you're ready to go, and when you meet the person, or you go talk to the person, you can have a conversation. Then it's time to talk. So make sure to first listen to what the other person is saying using those active listening skills. Try to understand their perspective and then also be upfront about what your needs and your wants are. Don't be afraid to get creative with them. I know sometimes we're like, this is the solution that I want, and if it's not, then I won't compromise. But sometimes like, think about it, you're gonna bring in your 2 cents, and then they're also bringing in their 2 cents. So put them together. You guys could probably come up with something great. And if for some reason you're not agreeing this time you guys are talking, try not to freak out. You guys can take a break, come back with a fresh head, and then keep talking again, maybe 5 minutes, or maybe you need to just touch bases a week from now. And remember that the goal is to find a solution where everyone is happy. So we might have to compromise. And once you've reached an agreement, I highly recommend you get it in writing. Uh, Even if it's just like friends, like maybe put it over text, or if it's work, put it in an email. That way you can always go back and be like, this is what we're doing to resolve the issue. And if anything ever arises where agreements aren't being met, you can just go back to like, you said this and I said I would do this. And it's a form of accountability because then you can just go back and make sure that you're keeping your part and that they're keeping their part. But make sure to stick to your part because that's really essential. And negotiating is a skill, so it's not going to be something that you get right away. We need to practice it, and it's okay if it doesn't work out the first time. And then emotional regulation. Um, so the truth of the matter is that we may find ourselves dealing with conflict, and when we're dealing with conflict, our emotions are going to go crazy. So we may start crying, we're going to shut down, or we simply might just go mute and not want to talk to anyone. Uh, but to take care of ourselves, we need to get to know ourselves a little better. We need to recognize what triggers us. And to recognize our emotional triggers, this isn't something you do while you're in the conflict. This is something you start doing ahead of time, like right now. Like you may not be in a conflict currently, but you can always take the time to, journal, or if you have like a notes app on your phone, taking the time to being like, today I felt anxious because of this, or today I got really upset because this person said this. This way, you're able to recognize yourself and what triggers your emotions. That way, when those emotions arise in a heated situation, you can kind of take a breath and then be like, okay, I shouldn't do this because this is going to lead me to do something I may regret later on. Instead, you could step away and just think about it. And honestly, stepping away is completely a million percent okay. You can always just ask to excuse yourself and try to recollect before engaging because you never want to say something that you're going to regret in a heated moment because you were upset or you were angry. Your emotions are going to take over you sometimes. So sometimes it's best to be like, okay, this person will not, nothing bad will happen to them if I just step away for a minute just to recollect my thoughts. Um, you could also try doing some relaxation techniques. So whether it be you taking a walk down the hall or going outside, you could do some journaling or doing some breathing exercises, or you could do a quick Google search of what should I do to calm down, and then it'll compile a whole list. So try one of those things out. And remember that someone is always willing to listen. You could vent to your friend, a family member, a classmate, a professor. I believe that half the time just getting things out of your chest can make conflicts kind of seem smaller than they did when you were dealing with them by yourself. Um, and now if you guys want, if you can put on the chat, and share some do's or don'ts for resolving conflict. So it could be things that we talked about today or some things that you've had personal experience with. Like you could say, do listen to people or don't roll your eyes when people are talking. So yeah, just feel free to type something in the chat. Yep. Don't jump into conclusions. I agree with you, Benedict. Do take the time to collect yourself. Yep. Thank you, Juan. Do be honest. Oh, they're coming in. Do be honest always. Acting honestly shows that you are consistent and principled and discursed. Don't have your response ready to go before the other person has finished speaking. Yeah. Be empathetic. Yeah.
Another thing to also say is also find out different resolutions for
Yeah.
conflicts. Because some people think that there's only one way to do something or there's no other way, but they haven't either reach out to different people or professional help to actually seek out for like the conflict.
I agree with you, Benedict. Someone said active listening, listen to the other person's perspective without interrupting, blame game, avoid blaming the other person instead of focusing on the problem. Yeah, these are all great, guys. I'm glad you guys can all agree. I feel like all the responses um kind of meet in a way. And then adopt a neutral position, of course. Okay. So, what would you do if all fails? You could type it in the chat if you have any ideas. Like, no, like you can't come to an agreement with the person. It's just back and forth bickering, and no one is getting to any solutions. No one's happy. What would you do? Take some time away from the conflict? Yeah, stepping away. Maybe agree to disagree and try to. Oh, they're coming in. Maybe agree to disagree and try to step back from the disagreement for some time. If initial conflict resolution strategies fail, consider involving a neutral third party to help facilitate the conversation and find a resolution. Bring in a mediator? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Changing to a different mindset to the conflict? Yeah. So, yeah, you all have touched bases on what I said for if all fails. So, I believe someone talked about bringing in a mediator or third party. So, yeah, seeking those external support is always needed if things aren't going as you thought they would. Um, if the approach you had in mind isn't quite working, it's okay to go back and reassess and just either tweak some things or come up with a new solution to present. Uh, Sometimes our emotions can become overwhelming, as I mentioned. But if we keep uh, allowing ourselves to go down this rabbit hole of things aren't working, why aren't they working, and you're already stressed from the conflict, you're essentially just hurting yourself. You're not taking care of your well being. It's going to take a toll on your mental and physical health. So it's okay sometimes to just step away, bring in someone else, or start the solution process all over again. And to wrap up for today, the number one step to resolving conflict is to talk things out and be understanding. If there's no win-win uh, solution for the issue, try to negotiate it. And of course, take the time to make the peace last and prevent the same issue from happening. And we have another one. Someone said depends on a lot of context. Usually I'd agree to disagree, but if it's a matter of personality conflicts, I try to establish a bare minimum of what they would agree to do. Yeah, these are great recommendations. Well, that's all I have for you all today. I appreciate you all for swinging by. Does anyone have any questions or do they want to share something with the group? If not, our last leadership lunch series is going to be December 4th at 1 p.m. and we're going to be talking about self-awareness. And I appreciate you all for coming today. Thank you.